So there I was, middle of February, 3 in the morning, and something was scratching at my front door. Now, I have lived in this cabin for going on 27 years. I have heard coyotes howl so close, it felt like they were sitting on my porch. I have had deer walk right up to my window like they were window shopping. But this sound, this was different. This was heavy, this was slow, and whatever was making it, it was big. I grabbed my lantern off the hook, and I am not gonna lie to you, my hands were shaking, not from the cold. I mean, yeah, it was probably -15 outside, but that was not why. I just knew. Something in my gut told me that whatever was on the other side of that door was not something I had dealt with before, and I was right. But before I get into what happened next, let me back up a little bit, because if you are going to understand why this whole thing hit me the way it did, you need to know a few things about me and about this place I call home. My name is Arthur. Well, most folks around here just call me Art. I turned 74 last November, and I have been living alone in this cabin since I was 47. That is a long time. Longer than some of you have been alive, probably. The cabin sits about 9 miles outside of a small town called Harlan, up in northern Montana. And when I say small, I mean small. We are talking one gas station, one diner, a post office that is only open 3 days a week, and a general store that sells everything from canned beans to fishing line. My cabin is tucked back in the trees, right at the edge of a valley that runs along a frozen creek. In the summer, that creek is beautiful, crystal clear water, trout jumping, the whole thing. But in the winter, everything freezes over. The creek, the trails, even the air feels like it freezes. You step outside, and your nose hairs turn into little icicles within about 10 seconds. That is the kind of cold I am talking about. I built most of this cabin with my own 2 hands. Well, me and my buddy Frank, but Frank passed away about 8 years back. Heart attack, right in the middle of fixing his truck. One minute he was cussing at a rusted bolt, the next minute he was gone. That is life up here, though. It does not wait around for you to be ready. Now, I chose to live out here for a reason. After my wife Margaret passed in '96, I just could not do the city thing anymore. Everything reminded me of her. The grocery store where she used to squeeze every avocado before picking one. The park bench where we used to sit and watch the pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. I needed to get away from all of it. So I sold the house, packed what I could fit in my truck, and drove north until the roads ran out. And honestly, for the most part, it has been good, quiet, peaceful, just me in the mountains and more snow than any one person should have to deal with. I got my wood stove, my rocking chair, a shelf full of books I have read at least 3 times each, and a dog named Biscuit. Well, I had a dog named Biscuit. He passed 2 winters ago, 14 years old, which is pretty good for a dog his size. I still catch myself looking at his spot by the fire sometimes, expecting to see him curled up there. But that is another story. Point is, I am used to being alone out here. I am used to the quiet. I am used to the sounds this forest makes at night. The wind through the pines, the occasional crack of a branch under the weight of the snow, the distant howl of something that you hope stays distant. But that sound at my door in February, that was new. If you're enjoying this so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I know everybody says that, but I mean it. It really does help more than you think, and I got a lot more stories like this one coming. Now let me tell you something about winters up here that people from warmer places do not really understand. It is not just cold. Cold is what happens when you forget your jacket walking to the car. What happens up here in February is something else entirely. The temperature drops so low that the sap inside the trees actually freezes and expands, and you hear these loud pops and cracks in the middle of the night that sound like gunshots. First winter I was here, I must have jumped out of bed 6 or 7 times thinking someone was shooting at the cabin. Nope, just the trees exploding. Welcome to Montana and the darkness. Oh man, the darkness. In February, the sun goes down around 5:30 and does not come back up until almost 8. That is a lot of dark hours. A lot of time with nothing but the fire and the wind and your own thoughts. Some people would lose their minds. Honestly, some people do lose their minds. There is a reason they call it cabin fever, and it is not because it sounds catchy. I have had winters where I did not see another human being for 3 weeks straight. 3 weeks, no face, no voice, nothing. Just me talking to Biscuit, and after he was gone, just me talking to myself. which I still do, by the way. I am not ashamed of it. Sometimes you just need to hear a human voice, even if it is your own. The night the bear showed up, it had been 12 days since I had spoken to anyone. 12 days since I drove into Harlan to pick up supplies and had a 5-minute conversation with Donna at the general store about whether or not the price of propane was ever going to come back down. Spoiler, it did not. So when I heard that scratching at the door, part of me, and this is going to sound strange, part of me was almost relieved because at least something alive was out there. At least something in this frozen, silent world had found its way to my door. All right, so back to the door. I am standing there in my long johns, holding my lantern in one hand and my old Winchester in the other. Now, I do not go around pointing guns at things for no reason, but when you live alone in the wilderness and something big is scratching at your door at 3 a.m. in the dead of winter, you do not answer it with a handshake and a smile. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the handle, and I pulled that door open about 6 inches, just enough to peek out. And there it was, a bear. A black bear, to be specific, though in the dark, it just looked like a massive shadow with eyes. And those eyes, man, I will never forget those eyes. They were not angry. They were not aggressive. They were, and I know this sounds crazy, but they were scared. This bear looked at me the way Biscuit used to look at me during thunderstorms. Just pure, raw fear. Now here's the thing you need to understand about bears in February in Montana. They should not be awake. Black bears go into hibernation usually around late November, sometimes early December, and they do not come out until March or April. So for a bear to be standing on my porch in the middle of February, something was very wrong. I opened the door a little wider, and that is when I saw it. The bear's left front leg was messed up, bad. There was a gash running from its shoulder down to about mid-forearm, and it was not fresh, but it was not healed either. It looked infected. The fur around it was matted and dark, and even in the dim light of my lantern, I could see that the skin underneath was swollen and angry looking. The bear made this sound, not a growl, not a roar. It was more like a moan. A deep, low, rumbling moan that I felt in my chest more than I heard it. And then it just sat down, right there on my porch, like it had walked as far as it could walk, and this was where it decided to stop. Now I know what you are thinking. Art, what in the world are you doing standing that close to a bear? And you are right. That is a fair question. Under normal circumstances, you see a bear, you back away slowly, you make yourself look big, you do not make direct eye contact. I know all that. I have lived in bear country for almost 3 decades, but this was not a normal circumstance. This bear was not hunting. It was not looking for food in my trash cans. It was hurt. It was scared, and it came to my door. Out of every tree, every rock, every cave in these mountains, this bear came to my porch. And something about that, I do not know. It just got to me. I set the Winchester down against the wall. I know. Probably not the smartest move, but I did it anyway. I went back inside and grabbed a bowl, filled it with water from my kettle. Nice and warm. I brought it outside and set it down about 3 feet from the bear. Then I backed up and waited. The bear looked at the bowl, looked at me, looked at the bowl again. Then it leaned forward, real slow, and started drinking. And while it drank, I got a better look at that wound on its leg. It was worse than I thought, way worse. I could see bone in one spot. I'm not a vet, I'm not a doctor, but I have patched up enough injuries on myself and on animals over the years to know that if that wound did not get treated, this bear was going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And that is when I made a decision that most people would probably call stupid. But at 74 years old, living alone in the mountains, I have earned the right to be a little stupid. I decided to help it. Now let me be real with you for a second. This was not some heroic moment where dramatic music plays and the camera zooms in on my face. This was a tired old man in his underwear at 4 in the morning, standing in his doorway in negative 15-degree weather, looking at a wounded bear and thinking to himself, well, I guess this is what I am doing now. There was no plan. There was no strategy. There was just a feeling in my gut that said, if I closed this door and went back to bed, I would regret it for whatever time I had left on this earth. And at 74, you do not have a lot of time left to waste on regret. I also thought about Maggie. She would have helped this bear. Without hesitation. Maggie was the kind of person who stopped the car every time she saw a stray dog, who left water bowls on the porch for the neighborhood cats, who once drove 30 miles out of her way to bring a baby bird she found in a parking lot to a wildlife rescue center. She had this enormous capacity for caring about things that most people walked right past. And standing there looking at June, even though I did not know her name yet, I could almost hear Maggie's voice in my head saying, "Arthur James Hutchinson, you better not close that door." So I did not. Now, helping an injured bear is not like helping an injured dog. You cannot just walk up to it and start wrapping bandages around it. This thing weighed probably 350 pounds, maybe 400. Even injured, even weak, one swipe of that paw could take my head clean off my shoulders, so I had to be smart about it. First thing I did was go back inside and think. I sat in my rocking chair and I just thought. The bear was still on my porch. I could hear it breathing through the door, heavy, labored breaths. Whatever was wrong with that leg was taking a toll on the rest of its body too. Here is what I came up with. I had some leftover venison in my cold storage out back, about 20 pounds of it, wrapped up in butcher paper. I also had a bottle of antibiotics that my doctor in town had prescribed me for a tooth infection about 6 months prior. I never finished them because the infection cleared up after about 4 days. And I am one of those people who stops taking pills the second I feel better. I know you are not supposed to do that, but I have been doing it my whole life, and I am still here, so make of that what you will. I figured if I could get the bear to eat the venison, and if I could crush up some of those antibiotics and mix them in, maybe I could at least start fighting whatever infection was in that wound. It was not a great plan. I am fully aware of that. A real vet would probably have my head for even suggesting it. But the nearest vet was 45 miles away. It was 3 in the morning. There was 2 feet of snow on the road, and I was not about to load a 350-pound bear into my truck. So I went out to the cold storage, grabbed about 5 pounds of venison, and broiled it inside. I crushed up 4 of the antibiotic capsules and mixed the powder in with the meat, kneading it in real good so the bear would not taste it and refuse to eat. Then I took it outside. The bear was still there. It had moved a little, shifting its weight off the bad leg, but it was still on my porch. I set the meat down about 2 feet from its face and stepped back. It sniffed the air. Then it sniffed the meat. And then it ate. Slowly at first, like it was not sure if this was a trick, but then faster, tearing into the venison with a hunger that told me this animal had not eaten in a while. Probably days, maybe longer. While it ate, I did something else that was probably stupid. I talked to it. I said, "Hey there, big guy. You are all right. Nobody is going to hurt you here. Just eat your food and rest up. You are safe." Now, did the bear understand me? No, obviously not. Bears do not speak English, but I think the sound of a calm voice does something. It did with Biscuit. It did with the horses I used to work with back when I was younger. Animals can feel the energy you put out, and I was trying real hard to put out the energy of someone who was not a threat. The bear finished the meat, licked its chops a few times, and then did something I did not expect. It laid down. Right there on my porch. Just put its head on its good paw and closed its eyes. It was not asleep. I could tell because its ears were still moving, tracking sounds. But it was resting, and it chose to rest right there, 3 feet from my front door. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat in my rocking chair. I did not sleep that night, not a wink. Just sat there, listening to that bear breathe on the other side of my wall, wondering what in the world I had gotten myself into. By the way, if you are liking this story, make sure to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to show this video to more people, which means I can keep making these for you guys. Morning came slow, the way it always does in February up here. The sun does not really rise so much as it just kind of seeps over the mountains, like it is not sure it wants to commit to the day yet. I got up from my chair, my back screaming at me for sitting in one position all night, and I went to the window. The bear was still there. It had shifted positions during the night, curling up a little tighter, and in the morning light I could see it better now. It was a female, probably 4 or 5 years old based on her size. Her fur was patchy in spots, not just around the wound, but in other places too. Ribs showing through. This bear had been having a rough go of it for a while, not just the leg thing. Now, I want to stop here and explain something because I think it is important. A lot of people hear bear and they immediately think danger. They think teeth and claws, and that scene from The Revenant where Leonardo DiCaprio gets thrown around like a rag doll. And look, I get it. Bears can be dangerous, grizzlies especially, but black bears, they are a different animal in more ways than one. Black bears are generally shy. They want nothing to do with you. Most of the time, if a black bear sees a human, it turns around and goes the other way. They are not looking for trouble. They are looking for berries and grubs and an easy meal. The only time a black bear gets aggressive is if it feels cornered, if it is protecting cubs, or if it is starving. And this one, well, she was starving. But starving animals do not fight. They conserve. Every calorie matters when you are running on empty. And picking a fight with a human burns a lot of calories for very little. Reward. She was not dangerous. She was desperate. There is a big difference. I made myself some coffee. Real coffee, not that instant stuff. I got a little French press that I have been using for about 15 years, and I ground the beans by hand with a crank grinder. It takes a while, but the sound of the grinding and the smell of the fresh coffee, that is how I start every morning. It is my routine. And when you live alone, routines are everything. They keep you sane. They give the day a shape. Without routines, every day just kind of blurs into the next one, and before you know it, a month has gone by and you cannot remember a single thing you did. Anyway, I made my coffee, ate a piece of toast, and then I got to thinking about the bear situation. Here is my problem. I could not just leave this bear on my porch indefinitely. First of all, it is a wild animal, a big one. And even though she seemed calm right now, that could change at any moment. Bears are unpredictable. Everybody who lives up here knows that. Second, if she stayed too long, she was going to start associating my cabin with food and warmth. And that is how you end up with a bear that breaks into your house in the middle of the night because it knows there is venison inside. That is a situation that does not end well for anybody. But on the other hand, I could not just shoo her away. She was hurt. She was starving. She was awake in the middle of winter when she should have been sleeping in a den somewhere, burning off stored fat. If I chased her off, she was going to wander out into the snow and she was going to die. I was certain of that. So I did what I always do when I cannot figure something out. I called Donna. Donna Whitfield runs the general store in Harlan. She is 68 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and she knows more about the wildlife up here than anyone I have ever met. She also has a satellite phone, which is the only reason I was able to call her, because my cabin does not get cell service, and my landline goes out every time the wind blows hard enough. I hiked out to my truck, which was parked about 200 yards from the cabin on the access road, and I used the CB radio to reach the gas station in town, and they patched me through to Donna. "Art," she said, in that gravelly voice of hers, "why are you calling me at 7 in the morning?" I told her about the bear, about the wound, about the antibiotics in the venison. There was a long pause on the other end. "You fed a wild bear crushed up amoxicillin in raw venison," she said. It was not a question. It was more like she was just trying to process the level of stupidity she was dealing with. I said, "Well, when you say it like that, it sounds bad." She laughed. That big, loud Donna laugh that you can hear from across the store. Then she got serious. She told me that what I was probably dealing with was a bear that had been injured in a fight with another bear, or possibly by a trap, and that the injury had gotten infected, which caused the bear to come out of hibernation early because her body temperature was spiking from the infection and her system was basically burning through her fat reserves at double speed trying to fight it off. She said the antibiotics might actually help if the infection was bacterial, which most wound infections are, but she said I needed to keep the dosage consistent, not just one night of crushed pills in meat. I needed to do it every day for at least 10 days if I wanted it to make any real difference. She also said I needed to clean that wound somehow. And when I asked her how exactly I was supposed to clean a wound on a 350-pound wild bear, she said, "Well, Art, that is your problem, not mine." Then she hung up. I love Donna. She is the most helpful and least helpful person I know at the same time. After I hung up with Donna, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Now, I am a list guy. Always have been. Maggie used to make fun of me for it. She would say, "Art, you do not need a list to go to the grocery store. It is 3 items." And I would say, "Maggie, without a list, I will come home with 12 things we do not need and none of the 3 things we do." That is just how my brain works. So I made a list. Number 1, feed the bear medicated venison twice a day. Number 2, clean the wound with iodine. Number 3, do not get killed by the bear. Number 4, figure out what to do when the antibiotics run out. That last one worried me. I only had about a dozen capsules left. At 4 per day, that was 3 days of medication. Not enough. Not nearly enough for a wound that bad. So I called Donna again. She sighed so loud I heard it through the static on the CB radio. She told me she had some veterinary-grade antibiotics at the store that she kept in stock for the ranchers who came through. Amoxicillin, same thing basically, but in bigger doses. She said she would set some aside for me, but I had to come get them myself because she was not driving 9 miles through the snow to enable my insanity. Her words. The problem was, going into town meant leaving June alone for at least 3 hours. The drive to Harlan is about 45 minutes each way on a good day. And in February, on those roads, it is more like an hour, plus whatever time I spent in town. I did not love the idea of leaving her that long, but I did not have a choice. She needed those antibiotics. I loaded up the truck the next morning, left an extra portion of venison on the porch for June, and headed into town. The whole drive I was thinking about her, wondering if she would be there when I got back, wondering if she would wander off, or if another animal would find her, or if the cold would be too much while I was gone. It is crazy how fast you can start caring about something. 24 hours earlier, I did not even know this bear existed. Now, I was driving through a snowstorm, worried sick about her, like she was family. Donna had the antibiotics ready when I got there. She also had a look on her face that was equal parts concern and amusement. She said, "Art, in 40 years of running this store, I have sold ammunition to hunters, flea medicine to cat ladies, and snakebite kits to tourists who thought they saw a rattlesnake in December. But I have never in my entire career sold veterinary antibiotics to a 74-year-old man who is treating a wild bear on his front porch. So congratulations on being the weirdest customer I have ever had." I paid for the antibiotics, bought some extra venison from the butcher counter, and drove home as fast as the roads would let me. When I pulled up to the cabin, I held my breath, looked at the porch. She was still there. The venison I left was gone, and she was sleeping in the same spot. I let out a breath I did not even know I was holding. So now I had a plan, sort of. Feed the bear medicated venison every day for 10 days and somehow figure out how to clean that wound. Easy, right? The feeding part was actually not that hard. I had enough venison stored to last a while, and I had plenty of the antibiotics left. Every morning at sunrise and every evening at sunset, I would bring out about 3 pounds of meat with the crushed up pills mixed in, and every time the bear ate it. By the 3rd day, something started to change. The bear was not flinching when I came outside. The first couple of days, every time that door opened, her head would snap up and her muscles would tense, and you could see her calculating whether she needed to run or fight. By day 3, she just looked at me, almost like, "Oh, it is you again, the food guy." By day 5, she let me sit on the porch while she ate. Not close to her. I am not that crazy. I sat on the far end, about 8 feet away, in my old wooden chair that I keep out there for summer evenings. And she ate her food, and I drank my coffee, and we just sat there. 2 living things sharing a porch in the middle of a frozen wilderness. That was the morning I named her. I know you are not supposed to name wild animals. Donna would have given me an earful about that, but I could not keep calling her the bear in my head. So I called her June, because my wife Margaret's middle name was June, and there was something about this bear, something about the way she looked at me with those big dark eyes, that reminded me of Maggie, not in a weird way, just in the way that they both had this look like they could see right through you, like they knew exactly what kind of person you were just by looking. Now, the wound cleaning. That was the hard part. I spent days thinking about how to do it. I could not just walk up to her with a rag and some peroxide. She would take my arm off. I needed to do it without her really noticing, or at least without her feeling threatened. What I ended up doing was probably the most redneck veterinary procedure in the history of medicine. I rigged up a system using a garden sprayer, the kind you use for weed killer. I cleaned it out real good, no chemicals left, and I filled it with warm water mixed with iodine solution. Donna sold me the iodine. She charged me double for it too, because, and I quote, Stupidity tax. I waited until June was eating her evening meal, real focused on the food, and I sat down at my usual spot on the far end of the porch. Then I slowly, real slowly, extended the sprayer wand toward her injured leg, and I gave it one gentle pump. She flinched, looked at me. I froze. She looked at the food, looked at me again, then went back to eating. So I pumped again, just a gentle mist of warm iodine water on the wound. She flinched less this time. Over the next 30 minutes, I must have pumped that sprayer about 50 times. Just gentle, warm mists. By the end, she was not even flinching anymore, and I could see the iodine doing its work, loosening up the dried blood and crud around the wound, starting to clean out the infection. I did this every evening for the next 5 days, and every evening, she let me get a little closer, a little more direct with the spray. By day 8, I was sitting about 4 feet from her, spraying the wound almost directly, and she was just laying there eating venison like this was the most normal thing in the world. And you know what? The wound was looking better. I am not making this up. The swelling was going down. The redness was fading. The infection was losing. Between the antibiotics in the food and the iodine rinses, this bear's body was starting to heal. I sat there on day 8, watching her eat, watching that wound slowly close itself up, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Purpose, like I was supposed to be here, right now, doing exactly this. Like every decision I ever made, from losing Maggie to moving up here to that night when the scratching woke me up, it all led to this porch and this bear and this moment. I know that sounds dramatic. Trust me, I am not a dramatic guy. I am a 74-year-old man in long johns who smells like wood smoke and iodine. But some moments just hit you different. There was one evening during that stretch, I think it was day 7, where something happened that I still think about all the time. I was sitting on the porch, doing my usual thing, spraying the wound while she ate. And when she finished eating, she did not get up and move to the other side of the porch like she usually did. She just stayed there. And then she let out this long, slow breath, almost like a sigh. And she shifted her weight and leaned just slightly, just barely, in my direction, not touching me, but closer than she had ever been. And I froze, not out of fear, out of something else entirely, out of the realization that this wild animal, this creature that could end my life with one swing of her paw, was choosing to be near me. Not because I had food. The food was gone. Not because she was trapped. She could have walked away at any point. She was choosing to sit next to me on this porch in the freezing cold because on some level, she felt safe. I have lived a long life. I have had good days and days I do not remember at all. But that moment, sitting on a frozen porch in the dark with a wild bear leaning in my direction, that is one of the most peaceful moments I have ever experienced. And I have no way to explain that to someone who has not felt it. It is like trying to explain what snow looks like to someone who has never seen it. You can use all the words you want, but they will never really get it until they are standing in it. I sat there for about an hour, did not move, did not speak, just breathed. And she breathed, and the forest breathed around us. And for 1 hour in a life full of noise and loss and confusion, everything was perfectly, completely still. Day 9 is when things went sideways. I woke up to a sound that was not June. It was a truck. Now, nobody drives out to my cabin. The road is barely a road even in the summer, and in the winter, it is basically a suggestion. So when I heard that engine rumbling through the trees, I knew something was up. I got dressed, went outside, and sure enough, there is a big green pickup truck with Montana Fish Wildlife and Parks written on the side, bouncing its way up my access road. 2 guys got out. One was young, maybe late 20s, all official looking with a clipboard. The other was older, maybe my age, with a thick gray mustache and the kind of face that said he had seen some things. The young one introduced himself as Officer Reynolds. The older one just said, "Call me Dutch." They said they had gotten a report about a bear seen wandering in the area, way too early for the season, and they were checking on it. Now I am going to be honest with you. My first instinct was to lie. Just say, "Nope, no bear here, have not seen anything. Good luck, fellas." But here is the problem with lying. If they found June on my porch, which they would because she was literally right there around the corner of the cabin, then I would not just be the crazy old guy who feeds bears. I would be the crazy old guy who feeds bears and lies to wildlife officers. That is a whole different level of trouble. So I told them, I said, yeah, there is a bear. She is on my porch. She has been there for about 9 days. She is injured, and I have been treating her. The look on Officer Reynolds' face was something I wish I had a camera for. His mouth literally fell open. Dutch, on the other hand, just kind of nodded, like this was not even the strangest thing he had heard this week. They came around to the porch, and when Reynolds saw June, he started reaching for his radio. I knew what that meant. Standard protocol for a habituated bear, especially an injured one, is to either relocate it or put it down. And relocating a bear in the middle of February in this terrain was basically impossible, which meant there was really only one option they were considering. I am not going to lie, something in me just broke at that moment. I stepped in front of Reynolds and I said, "Son, I have been alive for 74 years. I have buried a wife, buried a best friend, and buried a dog who was the only family I had left. I am not burying this bear." Dutch put his hand on Reynolds' arm, the one reaching for the radio, and he said, "Let me talk to him." We sat in my kitchen, Dutch, me, and 2 cups of coffee. He told me he understood. He really did. He had been doing wildlife management for over 40 years, and he had seen every version of this story. Old-timers getting attached to wild animals. It almost never ended well. The bear gets too comfortable around humans, wanders into town, scares somebody, and then it definitely gets put down. But he also told me something I did not expect. He said the wound treatment I was doing, the antibiotics and the iodine, it was actually not bad. Not great, not what a vet would do, but not bad. He had seen worse from actual wildlife rehabilitation centers. He said, "Here is what I am going to do. I am going to write in my report that we observed the bear, assessed it as recovering from a non-life-threatening injury, and that we recommend monitoring. That buys you about 2 weeks. If the bear is still on your porch in 2 weeks, I have to come back. And next time, I might not be able to talk Reynolds out of making the call." I shook his hand. I might have teared up a little. I am not ashamed of that. He stopped at the door and turned around. "One more thing," he said. "You are feeding her venison?" I nodded. He smiled. "Try mixing in some berries if you have any. Frozen is fine. It will help her gut process the antibiotics better." Then he left. Reynolds was still standing by the truck looking annoyed, but he got in and they drove off. I had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to get June healed up enough that she could leave on her own. 2 weeks before Dutch came back with Reynolds and his radio and his clipboard and his by-the-book attitude that would end with a bullet in June's head. I went into overdrive. I called Donna and told her everything. She called me 7 different kinds of idiot, which is actually less than I expected. Then she drove out to my cabin the next day with a box full of supplies, gauze pads, medical tape, more iodine, a bottle of fish oil capsules that she said were good for healing, and a bag of frozen blueberries. She also brought me a book about bear biology that she had ordered from a catalog about 10 years ago and never got around to reading. I read that book cover to cover in 2 days, and I learned something important. Black bears coming out of hibernation early due to infection is actually not that rare. What usually happens is the bear wakes up, wanders around confused and weak for a few days, and either the infection kills it or it finds enough food to fight it off and goes back into a dormant state until spring. The key word there is enough food. So I increased June's portions. Instead of 3 pounds twice a day, I was giving her 5 pounds in the morning and 5 in the evening, plus the blueberries, which she went absolutely nuts for. I mean, she loved those blueberries like they were candy. She would eat the venison at a normal pace, but the second I put those blueberries down, she was snapping them up like her life depended on it. Which, I guess, it kind of did. The wound was healing faster now. By day 12, the gash had closed over about 70%. New tissue was forming, pink and healthy looking. The swelling was almost completely gone, and she was putting weight on that leg again. Not a lot. She still favored it, but she was using it, and that was huge. She was also getting bigger. Not just from the food, but from rest. When she first showed up, she was gaunt. You could count her ribs. Now she was filling out again, looking more like what a healthy black bear should look like. Her fur was even starting to look better, less patchy, more full. Day 14, I woke up and she was not on the porch. My heart sank. Not because I thought she was gone, but because I thought something had happened to her. I threw on my boots and my coat, and I went outside, and I followed her tracks in the snow. Big, deep prints heading away from the cabin down toward the creek. I found her about a quarter mile from the cabin down by the frozen creek bank. She was sitting there, just looking at the ice. And as I watched, she stood up, walked to the edge, and she swiped at the ice with her good paw. 1, 2, 3 hits. On the 4th hit, the ice cracked and a chunk broke away, revealing the dark water underneath. And June, my June, stuck her face in that water and started fishing. She did not catch anything. The creek was mostly frozen, and any fish in there were deep. But the fact that she was trying, the fact that she had the strength and the instinct and the drive to walk down there and try to feed herself, that told me everything I needed to know. She was getting better. There was one night during that stretch, day 15, I think, where we had the worst storm of the season. And when I say storm, I do not mean some fluffy snowfall you see on Christmas cards. I am talking about a full-blown Montana blizzard, 60-mile-an-hour winds, visibility 0, snow coming down sideways so hard it sounded like sand being thrown at the walls. The kind of storm where you do not go outside for any reason, because if you get turned around in that whiteout, they will not find your body until spring. I was in the cabin stoking the fire, trying to keep the temperature above freezing inside, and all I could think about was June. She was not on the porch when the storm hit. She had gone down to the creek earlier that afternoon, and I had not seen her come back. And now this monster storm was bearing down on everything, and she was out there somewhere in it. I could not go look for her. I am not stupid. Walking into that blizzard would have been suicide for a 74-year-old man with bad knees and no sense of direction in a whiteout. But I could not sleep either, so I sat by the window all night, watching the snow pile up, listening to the wind scream, and wondering if I had just spent 2 weeks saving this animal only for a storm to take her out. Morning came. The storm had passed. I opened my front door, and there was a wall of snow about 4 feet high. I had to dig my way out with a shovel. It took me about 40 minutes just to clear enough to step off the porch. And there, about 10 feet from the cabin, tucked up against the woodpile on the leeward side of the building where the wind could not reach, was June, covered in snow, completely covered. She looked like a white mound, but when I got closer, I could see her side rising and falling. She was breathing. She was alive. She had found the one spot near the cabin that was sheltered from the wind, and she had ridden out the storm right there. She shook the snow off when she heard me and looked at me with those eyes, and I swear she looked annoyed. Like, "What took you so long with breakfast?" I laughed out loud. First time I had laughed like that in months, standing in 4 feet of snow at 7 in the morning, laughing at a bear. If anyone had seen me, they would have had me committed. If this story is hitting you in the feels right now, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. You do not want to miss what happens next because trust me, this story takes another turn. Day 18. Dutch's deadline was in 3 days. June was spending less time on the porch now and more time exploring the area around the cabin. She would wander off for a few hours down to the creek or into the tree line, but she always came back by evening for her meal. The wound was almost fully closed now, just a scar really, a big one running down her left leg, but a scar means healing, and healing means surviving. I had this weird feeling growing in my chest, like pride but also sadness. The better she got, the closer she was to leaving. And the closer she was to leaving, the more I realized how much I did not want her to go. Look, I know what this sounds like. Old man gets lonely, befriends a bear, cannot let go. And yeah, that is basically what it is. I am not going to dress it up and make it sound more noble than that. I was lonely. I had been lonely for years, and for 3 weeks, I had not been alone. I had a reason to get up in the morning that was not just coffee and routines. I had something that needed me. But here's the thing about loving something, whether it is a person or a dog or a bear on your porch. If you really love it, you have to be willing to let it go when it is time. Maggie taught me that, not on purpose. She did not sit me down and give me some wise speech about letting go. She taught me by dying, because when she was gone, I had to learn how to let go of someone I loved more than anything in this world. And the only way I survived it was by understanding that holding on to something that is gone will kill you faster than any disease or blizzard or bear ever could. Day 20. One day before Dutch was coming back, I woke up, made my coffee, and went to the porch with June's breakfast. But something was different. She was standing, not sitting, not lying down, standing, all four legs, weight distributed evenly. She looked strong. She looked healthy. She looked like a bear. She ate her breakfast. She ate her blueberries. And then she did something she had never done before. She walked up to me, close, real close. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched her, and she just stood there, looking at me with those big dark eyes. The same eyes that had been full of fear that first night, but now they were different. Not scared, not cautious, just, I do not know, present. Like she was really seeing me, really acknowledging me. I know bears do not say, "Thank you." I know they do not feel gratitude the way we do. I know all the science about not anthropomorphizing wild animals. I know all of that, but I also know what I saw. And what I saw was a living thing that knew, on some level, that another living thing had saved its life. She held my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, felt like an hour, and then she turned around, walked off the porch, and headed toward the tree line. I watched her go. Her gait was steady, strong. The limp was barely there. She reached the edge of the trees, and she stopped, turned her head back toward the cabin one more time. One more look, and then she walked into the forest, and the trees swallowed her up, and she was gone. I stood on that porch for a long time after that. The coffee got cold in my hands. My feet went numb in my boots. But I did not move, because sometimes you just need to stand in the place where something important happened and let it sink in before the world keeps going. Dutch showed up the next morning, right on time. Reynolds was with him again, clipboard in hand, looking like he was ready to do what he thought needed to be done. I was on the porch when they pulled up. Dutch got out of the truck and looked around. No bear? I shook my head. She left yesterday. Reynolds looked skeptical. How do you know she will not come back? I said, because she does not need to. Dutch looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at the porch, at the spots where June had worn the snow down from laying in the same place for 3 weeks. He looked at the garden sprayer still sitting in the corner. He looked at the empty bowl I had not had the heart to pick up yet. He said, "You did good, Art." Reynolds started to say something, probably something about regulations or protocols or whatever, but Dutch just held up his hand and Reynolds shut his mouth. I liked Dutch. Dutch understood things that could not be written down on a clipboard. They left, and I was alone again. But here's the thing, it was different this time. The alone felt different. Before June, the quiet of this cabin felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me that there was nobody else here to hear them. Every meal I made for one felt like evidence of something I had lost. After June, the quiet felt lighter, because now, when I sat in my rocking chair and looked at the fire, I was not just remembering the things I had lost. I was remembering the thing I had found. This wounded, scared, hungry bear that showed up at my door in the middle of the worst part of winter, and somehow, between the two of us, we got through it. I still had her bowl by the door. I washed it out and put it on the shelf next to Biscuit's old collar and Maggie's reading glasses and a photo of Frank from the summer we built this cabin. My little museum of things that mattered. The weeks after June left were strange. I kept catching myself doing things out of habit, waking up at dawn to prepare her food, reaching for the garden sprayer, looking out the window to check on the porch. It is funny how quickly a routine becomes a part of you. 3 weeks. That is all it took. 3 weeks of taking care of something, and suddenly my whole day was structured around it. And when it was gone, the day felt shapeless again. Like a house with no furniture. Still a house, technically, but it feels wrong. It feels empty in a way that is bigger than the space itself. I talked to Donna about it one afternoon when I drove into town for supplies, told her I was feeling kind of low. She looked at me over the counter with those sharp eyes of hers and said, "Art, you are not depressed. You are grieving, and there is a difference. Depression is when you cannot feel anything. Grief is when you feel too much. And the only cure for grief is time and purpose." She was right. She usually is. Annoying, but right. So I found purpose. I started writing things down. Everything that happened with June, from the first scratch at the door to the last look at the tree line. I wrote it all in a notebook, in my terrible handwriting, because I did not want to forget any of it. And somewhere in the middle of writing it down, I realized that this was not just a story about a bear. It was a story about what happens when two broken things find each other at exactly the right time. She was broken in her body. I was broken in a different way. And for 3 weeks, we fixed each other. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Spring came late that year. It always does when you are waiting for it. But it came. The snow started to pull back from the trees. The creek thawed, and you could hear it gurgling again. Water running over rocks, finding its way down the mountain the way it had been doing for 1,000 years before I got here, and would keep doing for 1,000 years after I was gone. I was on my porch one evening in late April, drinking coffee and watching the sun go down. The light was different. Now, golden, warm. The air smelled like wet pine and mud, which sounds unpleasant, but if you have ever lived through a Montana winter, that smell is basically perfume. It means the world is coming back to life. And that is when I saw her, at the edge of the tree line about 50 yards from the cabin. A black bear, bigger now, fuller, healthy looking, and on her left front leg, a long scar running from shoulder to mid-forearm. June. She was not alone. There were 2 small shapes tumbling around her feet. Cubs, 2 of them, barely bigger than footballs, falling over each other the way puppies do when they are still figuring out how their legs work. She had found a mate. She had denned up somewhere. She had given birth. And now she was out here, in the spring sun, with her babies, alive, strong, everything she was supposed to be. She did not come to the porch. She did not need to. She was wild again, fully wild, and that was exactly how it should be. But she stopped at the tree line, and she looked at the cabin, and I would swear on my life, on Maggie's memory, on everything I hold dear, that she was looking at me. I raised my coffee cup, a toast, to her, to survival, to the weird, unexpected connections that happen in this life when you least expect them. Then she turned, nudged her cubs with her nose, and disappeared into the trees. I smiled, first real smile in a long time. I stood there for a while after she was gone, just standing on the porch, holding my coffee, listening to the spring birds starting to tune up in the trees, a woodpecker somewhere close, a couple of jays arguing about territory, the creek bubbling away like it had never been frozen at all. Life was coming back, not just for June, for everything, for me. I went inside and sat down at my table and opened the notebook where I had written everything down. I flipped to the last page and I wrote one more line. She came back. She brought her babies. She is going to be okay. Then I closed the notebook and I put the pen down and I poured myself another cup of coffee and I just sat there in my cabin, in the quiet. And for the first time in a very long time, the quiet did not feel heavy. It felt full of everything that had happened, full of the memory of those 3 weeks that changed something in me that I did not even know needed changing. You know, my buddy Frank used to say something that I thought was kind of corny at the time, but I think about it a lot now. He used to say, "Art, the mountains do not care about you. The snow does not care about you. The cold definitely does not care about you. But if you pay attention, if you really watch and listen, every once in a while the wilderness gives you a gift. And the trick is being awake enough to recognize it when it shows up." June was my gift. She showed up at my door, beat up and starving and scared. And in taking care of her, I remembered what it felt like to take care of something, to matter to something, to have a reason to get out of that rocking chair, besides just needing more coffee. I am 74 years old. My knees are shot. My back sounds like a bag of gravel when I stand up in the morning. I cannot see worth a damn without my glasses, and I fall asleep in my chair by 8 o'clock most nights. But I am alive. I am here. I have my cabin, and my wood stove, and my French press, and my shelf of books, and my little museum of things that matter. And now I have this story, and I have those 2 little cubs that are out there somewhere right now, growing up strong and wild and free, because their mama survived a winter she was not supposed to survive, because she found a cabin and an old man who was just stubborn enough to help. That is not nothing. That is something. That is a whole lot of something, actually. And I will tell you one more thing before I go. Last week, I was in Donna's store buying coffee, and she asked me how I was doing. And for the first time in years, I did not say fine. I did not give her that automatic answer that people give when they do not want to talk about how they are actually feeling. I said, "Donna, I am doing good, really good. And she looked at me, and she could tell I meant it. She smiled and said, "It is the bear, is it not?" And I said, "Yeah, it is the bear." She shook her head and said, "You know, Art, most people get a therapist. You got a 400-pound wild animal." I said, "Well, mine was cheaper." She laughed so hard she knocked a display of beef jerky off the counter. Some things you cannot explain. Some things you just have to live through to understand. This was one of those things. You know, people always ask me if I regret moving out here, if I miss the city, if I get lonely. And yeah, sometimes I do. But then something like this happens. Something that could only happen in a place this wild and this remote and this beautiful. And I remember why I am here. Because in the city, you are never alone, but you can feel lonelier than you have ever felt in your life. Out here, you are almost always alone, but every once in a while, something walks out of the woods and reminds you that you are not the only living thing fighting to make it through the winter. And that is enough. That is more than enough. This is Art signing off from the cabin. Stay warm out there. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me about a time an animal changed your life. I read every single one. And subscribe if you have not already, because next time I have got another story that I think you are really going to love. Until then, take care of yourselves. And if you see a bear on your porch at 3 in the morning, well, maybe think twice before you grab the gun. Sometimes all they need is a warm bowl of water and somebody who gives a damn.